Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 38th in Chicago Interim Design Open House. The meeting will start momentarily at 6:03. So just hang in for a minute and we'll start. Thank you.
Hey Trey, you're muted right now.
Sorry about that. So I'm going over the meeting logistics. The presentation will be 15 to 20 minutes long. The question and answer will be 40 to 45 minutes. Some questions will be responded to through the question and answer box verbally, but others will be responded via the text questions, text answers. The intention of this open house is to get feedback on a preferred option for the interim design, and we will not be accepting questions that kind of fall outside of those parameters. So as I mentioned, the intro agenda, we'll start off with intros from the staff members that are on the call for Metro Transit in the city of Minneapolis. Alexander Cato will go over the efforts underway at the intersection. We will talk about the interim design options, and then we'll dip into the segment of question and answers. And in the end, we'll conclude the open house at 7:30. So with that, I will transition to Alexander Cato, who will introduce himself.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for joining. My name is Alexander Cato. I'm a transportation planner with the city of Minneapolis. I'm just really excited to share this next hour with you all. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Ethan Foley. I'm the Vision Zero coordinator working on traffic safety for the city of Minneapolis. I'm also part of the outreach team for 38th in Chicago. Thanks so much.
And as you see, we're joined by Forrest Hardy, a transportation planner at the city of Minneapolis, who will be helping us with some of the back-end question and answer, and Amy Morgan, who will be helping out with a bit of technical questions.
All right, and my name is Katie Roth. I'm an assistant director of BRT Bus Rapid Transit projects at Metro Transit.
All right. I'll pass it off to Alexander Cato as he will start the presentation.
Thank you, Trey. So, hello everyone. As all of you know, on May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was killed while in the custody of former Minneapolis Police Department officers. That killing sparked a national and even global urge for racial equity and justice. Due to the magnitude of that event, 30th in Chicago was transformed into a central public gathering place and necessitated that public works install barricades within the vicinity to safely accommodate the volume of pedestrians and prevent private motorists from entering that space. Shortly after that, in around mid-June, city staff began engaging with local groups meeting in the area. Those included twice daily meetings of some immediate residents, a number of events hosted by neighborhood organizations such as Bryant, Central, and Powderhorn neighborhoods, and a variety of block meetings. Staff have attended these meetings, as I said, since mid-June and onwards. In addition, Council Vice President Jenkins, Councilmember Kano have also hosted a lot of virtual town halls around this event at 30th in Chicago. And as you can imagine, City Minneapolis 311 and 911 have received many calls about various aspects of 30th in Chicago. We've used a lot of that feedback to really filter into this stage in the process we're at right now, which is focused on the interim design. We're going to focus this presentation and the Q&A on that, but still understanding that there's a lot of other pieces that do intersect what happens here now and into the future. Just want to highlight a few of those since we feel it is very pertinent that we acknowledge a lot of the other questions, comments, concerns, such as the need for racial justice and racial healing, the implications of public safety in the area and around the city as well, providing a space for mourning and preserving much of the public art that's been created really organically in this space and is very beautiful. And access is a critical thing. We, especially in public works, think a lot about access. How do folks get in and out? How do goods and services get in and out? And that's really a critical piece of this presentation and this Q&A. There's also implications of long-term vision. What does this space become? And then thinking about ownership, equitable community ownership, home ownership opportunities. A lot of these issues have come up. I don't want to say issues, but a lot of these kind of questions, ideas, and opportunities have come up throughout this process since mid-June, as well as questions about winter, and a lot of ideas on should the street stay closed forever, should it open right away, and a lot of kind of points in between. So we've kind of really covered the gamut of that. And I think it's also critical that I do touch on the long-term commitments that the city has made to 38th in Chicago. Trey, could you go to the next slide, please? So these are just a few things that the city is already committed to. City Council passed a resolution declaring racism as a public health emergency and has committed to a series of action steps. The recently revised 2020 budget allocates $100,000 to support initial community engagement efforts around the co-creation of a long-term vision for this process that would start after we are able to implement interim design. The process we're talking about right now is an interim design, so it's just a temporary treatment for the area. We recognize that we want to have a long-term kind of reimagining of this intersection with community, and that money will be used to facilitate that process. There's also $150,000 for creative city making, and the city is going to hire a diverse team of artists and healers to create and implement a community engagement process to guide the city's community healing and rebuilding racial equity efforts. Other critical pieces to acknowledge are the 38th Street Thrive Cultural District Plan, which was actually planned to be adopted in June of 2020. Obviously, the killing of George Floyd really impacted that timeline, but there's a lot of pieces in that plan that tie in economics, community ownership, transportation, etc. And the work that we do here will tie into the long-term vision into that plan. The city's also put forth guidance on renaming Chicago Avenue in the area where George Floyd was killed. And lastly, accelerating funding to reconstruct 30th in Chicago in conjunction with the Metro D-Line bus rapid transit project. Next slide, please. So we in Public Works, and myself, I'm a Public Works employee and I'm a transportation planner by practice. And we think a lot about access. And really, when we think about access, we think about how do people, goods, and services enter and exit a space. The area of 30th Chicago is a really unique situation in that there's barricades up. It's essentially closed to vehicle access, although vehicles can enter and exit. But it's been closed in a way that we've never really seen in our city, with the exception of a construction in an area. And obviously there's been a lot of questions and challenges about how do we provide access in this throughout this process, and then how do we continue to provide access. Next slide, Trey. Oh, and go back to the last slide, actually, I apologize. So this picture was taken earlier this summer, has changed a bit, but is still relatively reflective of the north leg of Chicago near 37th in Chicago. And there's barricades in place, as well as some moving barricade structures. So this kind of just shows how the barricades are existing in their current form. Next slide, Trey. This actually occurred when I was on site. A woman was suffering from a medical seizure. The 911 was called. An E17 response vehicle entered into the area near the Fisk sculpture on the, I believe it was the east end of 38th Street. Through the barricades, there was a community member that was manning one of those barricades that opened that area up for the vehicle to enter. There was no issues with them entering and exiting and servicing that victim. Unfortunately, that person was okay, but there is a level of coordination that's needed to allow these vehicles into this space and in the existing configuration that it's in, that's very different than most of the other streets in our city. And when we start to think about the onset of winter, next slide, Trey. And we in Public Works, who are in charge of snow removal, we recognize the complexities of ensuring access to vehicles like that, to people, and to goods. And because of that, we have decided through our engagement with the community, next slide, Trey. Through our engagement with the community, we've really crafted a few principles that we recognize are really important as we move forward with this interim design, and likely will carry into a long-term vision for this space, but those principles have not yet been defined. But when we think about where we're at right now, we recognize one of the critical pieces is providing space for mourning and reflection. This area, 30th in Chicago, is still, very, there's still a lot of activity that occurs in that space. There's a lot of festivals, community gathering, picnics, squirt gun fights, street fairs, just a lot of public space is really enriched in this space, and we want to provide space for that. Also for the mourning, the reflection. We get people coming in from the community all over the country and even from the world, from other parts of the world to this space. So we want to make sure that we still honor and provide that opportunity for that to occur. Second is increasing visibility in the area. And we can talk about that through the design options, but there is a perspective that increased or having more eyes in an area, whether that be through vehicles or through pedestrians, enhances public safety. That's a really complex topic. I'm not a public safety expert. I can talk about it at a high level, but we do want to increase that visibility in that space. Number three is preserving that public art. I'm sure most of you are well aware of the Fisk sculpture in the middle of the intersection. There's also a lot of other really beautifully crafted organic pieces in that area that we want to preserve. Number four really ties in to the public works perspective in terms of improving residential transit and business access. We have Metro Transit on the line. Obviously the 5 and the 23 travel through this area quite frequently, and we want to be able to continue to provide that level of access. And lastly, the interim design, we don't view this as a return to normalcy. We view this as a very critical interim step to restore a level of access and maintain these principles now, and we'll use that to launch into a more long-term vision with the community. Trey, do you want to go to the next slide, please? Thank you. And so we've reached two design options, and I'll talk to those in the next slide. The first one is considered a converging one-ways, and the second one is two-way traffic on 38th in Chicago. Next slide, please. And just to level set on where we're at right now when we look at existing conditions, you see in the image on the left, essentially the four legs of the intersection have barricades up, 38th and Columbus, Elliott and 38th, 39th in Chicago, and Columbus in Chicago. There are additional barricades to the west and to the north as well, but these four barricades are really the kind of the core intersection barricaded area of 38th and Chicago. Next slide, please, Trey. So interim winter design option 1, Chicago Avenue converging one-ways, is proposing to retain the fifth sculpture in its current location while still allowing two-way east-west traffic along 38th Street and one-way traffic along Chicago. So you can see in the image on the left, two-way traffic will be allowed east and west in a pretty kind of standard fashion. To the north, we will have one-way traffic. So if you look at the north leg of Chicago, one-way traffic would travel southbound to the intersection. And if you look to the south leg of Chicago, one-way traffic would travel northbound in the intersection. So we call it a converging one-way. For folks watching the video, you can see my hands moving. And if you look to the image to the right, you'll see the fifth sculpture in the center of the intersection. And the way this works in terms of vehicle movements in the center of the intersection is that if you look on the left image, you'll see, or the left vehicle, it's an eastbound vehicle traveling east. They would travel east. When they get to the fifth, they would just navigate slightly around it and continue eastbound. Westbound vehicles would operate in the same way. They travel westbound, navigate around the fifth, and continue westbound. Southbound vehicles, however, would be for the north leg of the intersection. You see the car there that's traveling southbound. They would be required to take a right, as well as the vehicle on the south, which is a northbound vehicle. I apologize that I'm throwing a lot of terms out, but that vehicle would be required to take a right. So the two converging vehicles have to turn like this. The two east-westbound vehicles would continue through like that. We're calling that converging one-ways. This retains the fifth sculpture in the center. Some of the benefits to this, with a one-way vehicle configuration on Chicago, we are able to allocate less of the street to vehicles and use that extra space and use it as public space for a congregation gathering, for art, other activities. So we're providing more of the street for non-vehicle usage. We chose Chicago particularly because that is where a majority of the public space, public gathering occurs. There's more art there. It's also, you know, the area where George Floyd was killed. And so we want to maintain and protect that space. If you look closely, you'll see some orange lines around the call out for the George Floyd Memorial, and that area will be barricaded as well to protect pedestrians that are in that space from vehicles traveling nearby. There's also some protection on the northeast, or the northeast side of 38th Street, where there's also a lot of other artwork that would be barricaded as well to protect pedestrians in that space from motorists that would be traveling through. Some of the benefits to this space, it does reopen, or not reopen, it allows Metro Transit Route 23 to return service to 38th Street since it travels east-west. It's still undetermined if the 5 could return to Chicago under this configuration, because the 5 could in theory travel down Chicago, but when it enters this fifth, it would have to take a right and would essentially have to detour around. And Metro Transit is still doing some analysis as to the detour configuration routing and if that is really viable, or if they would just maintain their existing detour routing, which does not enter the intersection. So that's kind of one of the consequences with this design, is that it does not definitively return Metro Transit Route 5 to the intersection. It does return Metro Transit Route 23 to the intersection. Moving on to the next slide, Trey, please. So this option is called this option is called Interim Winter Design Option 2, two-way traffic on 38th and Chicago. And in this configuration, we would be relocating the Fisk sculpture to the northeast corner of the intersection. And there's still some, there's a level of flexibility in theory that Fisk sculpture could be relocated even further. We still need to really vet that out with community members to see what makes sense, but we would be in this option moving the sculpture from its current configuration, which is in the center of the intersection. So this would allow two-way traffic on Chicago in both directions, as well as 38th Street. If you look at the vehicle configuration here in the center, all vehicles in all directions would be able to perform their typical maneuvers, with the exception of the westbound vehicle. You can see it on the right of the zoomed in diagram. That vehicle could take a left, it could go through, but it could not take a right because the Fisk sculpture would preclude it from making that right turn to travel north on Chicago. So that is, you know, the vehicle configuration limitation with this design. This option does allow the Metro Transit Route 5 to return service to the intersection because the 5 can travel north and south in both directions without having to detour. So that's one of the stronger benefits to this example, is that the 5 and the 23 are both able to return service fully to the intersection. Some of the consequences, since we are having more roadway space allocated to vehicles, there is less space for public gathering, for art, etc., because we're occupying that extra travel lane with vehicles. We still are preserving, maintaining, and providing public space. We're still putting in barricades. It's just there's less of it on Chicago in comparison to option 1. And also the complexities of relocating the Fisk are something also that is a potential challenge with this, and just making sure we are able to relocate that Fisk safely in collaboration with community artists. So those are the two options that we are looking at. Next slide, Trey, please. And we're at a point now where we're going to transition into a Q&A. I'm going to let Trey take over and just provide the logistics for this. And during this phase, I'll be answering questions, Ethan will, and Katie Roth will as well. So please send your questions, and Trey, let us know how to proceed, please.
All right, thanks, Alexander. So as Alexander noted, the Q&A, we've received 3 questions so far. Please look to the directions here. You'll click on the web version, you'll click the Ask a Question button in the lower right corner of the window. Once that question comes in, staff will review the question, and if it pertains to the subject material here, it will be published for others to see. There is a like comment feature on published questions where attendees will be able to provide their input on the question. I'll be going over each question verbally, and they'll be assigned to the respective staff member on the call to answer. On the mobile version, select Q&A on the upper right side of the screen to view the question box, and the same steps as above. All right. So looks like we have a total of 4 questions so far. Looks like this first question is to Alexander, to you. It is from Jay Coles from KSTB TV. What is the target date to start reopening the zone between 37th and 39th of Columbus and Elliott? Where are the barricades? Where the barricades are, and when will that entire area be reopened completely? Thanks.
Okay, I'm just reading through. She provided a lot of details. Jay, thank you for the question. I think you're, to confirm, asking when will essentially the barricades be removed from their existing area, which is a great question. So we are right now, walking through these design concepts. We've posted an online survey, which is open through Sunday. We will be continuing to solicit general feedback from the public through Tuesday, October 6th. And then from there, we will internally review all public comments on the interim design and make a recommendation to the council members of the wards impacted and also to the Transportation and Public Works Committee. We do not yet have a date defined for implementation.
Thank you, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
The next question can either go to Alexander or Ethan. Would option 1 have a stoplight at the intersection or more of a roundabout?
Yeah, I can take this one, and please hop in, Ethan, if I with any additional comments. But this would still be a signal operated intersection. So there would be, red, yellow, green lights to provide movements through the intersection. Not like a typical roundabout, which is not signal controlled, and vehicles just yield and kind of move kind of in a flow. This would be a signal controlled intersection.
Ethan, do you have anything to add to that?
The only thing I would add is that there probably would be a little bit of an implementation period for the signal. And so for a short period, we might have stop signs at that intersection just as the signals are getting set up in that option 1.
Thank you, Ethan. The next question is again for Alexander. Will the people that live within the barricade be able to vote on these proposals?
So, thank you so much for that question. I don't want to call it voting, but we do have an online survey which is open through Sunday. And then we're also available for comment questions through Tuesday, October 6th. From there, we're taking all of that feedback, meeting with council ward members to dissect all of this information and then make a recommendation. But there is not a voting per se. It's more so us in taking all that information and trying to get a sense of how folks are responding. And we're especially interested. We're interested in all feedback, but especially interested in those members that live directly in that community or that are the most directly impacted by the intersection of 38th and Chicago and these interim designs.
Thanks, Alexander. The next question will go to you. I will go to option 2 for clarity. Option 2, would northbound traffic on Chicago be reduced to 1 lane through the intersection, then brought into 2 lanes after the sculpture?
Ethan, do you feel comfortable talking to this one?
Yeah, I definitely can. So northbound traffic would be 1 lane. There would be 1 lane of northbound traffic that would continue through the intersection. As you can see here on the layout, we are shifting the lanes a bit. So the northbound lane would be shifted over a little bit to the west, and that is so that we can accommodate and preserve the space near where George Floyd was killed. And so that is what is shown on the graphic, is we would have the barricades around that space to protect. That is a space we know that people are gathering regularly and to preserve that space. So there would be a lane shift, but the traffic would continue through the intersection there in 2-way fashion, both northbound and southbound.
Thank you, Ethan. Looks like the next question is for Ethan or Alexander. Under either option, would barricades be removed to ensure seamless travel in any direction?
Yeah, I could speak to this, and that's a great question, actually. Yes, the barricades would be removed. We are proposing for all of these options, removing all the barricades that exist within the vicinity of 38th and Chicago. And so it's really a matter of what type of configurations are we implementing in terms of protecting public space, and then for vehicle access as well. But all the barricades and these proposed options, in these proposed options, all of the barricades would be removed. All the barricades would be removed except we would be installing additional barricades to protect pedestrians near some of the art installations.
Thanks, Alex. Appears this next question is for either you or Ethan. Have we reached out to museums in the area, historical societies, and professional curators to preserve art? The historical site ought to be preserved so we never forget why we need police reform. Have we looked into storage containers to preserve offerings and art?
Yeah, I can take this. Mary Altman, who works in our community planning and economic development group and does our art preservation for the city, was unable to attend this call, but I connected with her earlier today and just had a few responses from her that I want to share. But the short answer is yes. An impressive community-led effort is underway to coordinate the care of the artwork, signs, and plantings at the memorial site with guidance from the Midwest Arts Conservation Center. To date, this group of over 20 volunteers has conserved 100 pieces of art, hundreds of art pieces. Artists from around the country have contributed major works of public art to the living memorial, including the Salem Cemetery, at the Flood Pond at 37th and Park, Morning Passage by Mary Mansfield, a pavement mural along Chicago Avenue with the names of nearly 150 people of color killed by the police, and a large-scale portrait of George Floyd by Peyton Scott Russell. City public art staff are in active conversations with artists and community members involved in art conservation, and especially in regards to winter preparation. If any art must be moved, we will work closely with artists and local community to do so.
Thank you, Alex. Next question is for either you or Ethan. Under either option, it would appear that snow plowing is going to be challenging. Won't you still have piles of snow around the sculpture, further limiting vehicle passage?
Ethan, do you mind taking this one?
Sure, yeah, we definitely have experience plowing adjacent to barricades that are set up. We have that happen frequently around construction zones that are maintained through the winter. So our city plow staff have know exactly the realities and of plowing adjacent to those. We are very confident with the options that we're presenting that we can maintain good winter maintenance through the area. That includes plowing adjacent to any barricaded off areas. And there will be, I think, additional coordination that will happen with communities members on site who are currently maintaining a lot of the details around the memorial space about how we want to best do winter maintenance in those areas. I will note that in this area, as in areas throughout the city, the sidewalk space is maintained and the responsibility of the local property owner to maintain that through the winter. So that would be true here as well. So.
Thanks, Ethan. The next question is one part question, another part statement. What other concerns are there beyond funding for busing and transportation? I am a resident and now have an opportunity to move beyond talk, move into action steps for Brown and Black residents. It is time to move toward Black liberation and make real shifts in our community. Please respond to the community's demands.
That's a great question. Thank you so much. There's no name with this question, but thank you so much for that submission. The city is very committed to taking action to support and invest in racial justice and healing in the area of 30th and Chicago. That work is ongoing. City leaders have met with the authors of the Justice Resolution Letter, which outlined a series of demands for the city to consider before barricades would be removed from the intersection. On September 17th, so a couple weeks ago, a written response from the city was provided to the authors of the Justice Resolution Letter. Talks are continuing around that response to reach a resolution that both parties can agree to so that the city can safely move forward on implementing an interim design option for the intersection of 38th and Chicago. Thank you.
Looks like the next question is two questions. Is Cup Foods anticipated to open? If not, can't the sculpture be moved to the street and completely open the intersection?
Ethan, do you want to take this?
Yeah, Cup Foods has reopened. I believe they're still open right now. They have opened previously as well. And so we do, option one maintains the fist sculpture as a sort of a roundabout in the middle of the intersection. And then where option two does move the fist sculpture to, still within the intersection, but off to the side a little bit. So we do have a couple different options around the fist sculpture, and we recognize that that's one of the key differences between the two options, and one where we're getting a lot of feedback from community members about how they would like to approach that. We know it's an important and iconic and powerful piece of art. And there's also the conversations with the artists themselves, as Alexander alluded to earlier, our public art coordinators having those conversations, and how do we prepare for winter, and what does the artist want to do, and so all of those things are sort of ongoing and play into the options, along with the feedback that we receive from folks.
Thank you, Ethan. The next comment is not a question, but for everyone, and I'll read the questions from Aaron Keith. Not a question, just so you know, the disruption of bus routes affects many folks all over. That makes option two, moving the fist sculpture to the northeast corner, the most logical and productive route. Lots of folks don't have online meeting capability. This meeting would fill any meeting room if it were held. If it was held, were we not socially distancing?
Katie, are you back online? I know you had to reset your computer. Okay.
Doesn't appear she's on. If Katie returns, we will pass this question over here for if she would like to interject for Metro Transit.
Mm-hmm. Is there, Trey, I have a few other common question answers I've gotten that I can speak to if there are not additional questions that are coming in.
There looks like there are two other questions, but we'll wait for those to be published. If they...
I can just speak to public safety. I think one of the most common questions we've gotten is around the public safety concerns in the area. Obviously, there's a lot of public safety concerns citywide, and the area of 30th and Chicago has experienced more than its fair share of those. I mean, I think there's been a lot of questions of how does the interim design impact public safety. We've heard a variety of perspectives of the potential impact of the street design on safety. We know this is a key issue for many people, and overall it's a very complex situation, and we cannot definitively say how these different options will impact public safety. We do know generally, though, that visibility often can help prevent crime, and expanded access can help increase visibility, especially as use of the site will evolve in the winter months. And just a few other pieces of kind of perspective on that. On public safety, in August, Council Vice President Jenkins, along with Minneapolis Police Chief Arredondo, and the Director of the Office of Violence Prevention, Sarah Cotton, convened an online meeting to discuss public safety within the area of 38th and Chicago. And there are a variety of efforts underway. Those folks that I referenced are really working actively on trying to alleviate these concerns. And I know specifically the Office of Violence Prevention has presented a community engagement timeline for what they are calling transforming public safety. And under that proposed plan, community members citywide will have opportunities to offer feedback on alternatives to policing and police responses, and public health-oriented violence prevention and law enforcement reforms, and/or changes or protocols to practices. I know that was a lot, but they are rethinking how can we best respond to the public safety concerns. Obviously, the police are one channel, but there's a lot of other resources that are starting to emerge that we feel may be more effective in certain situations. So we encourage folks to get involved in that process. Phase 1 is starting in October, so today through the end of December, and will include a variety of opportunities for public feedback. So I just wanted to kind of share that perspective. Once again, I'm a transportation planner. Ethan and Trey as well are all transportation planners. So public safety is something we have a general understanding of, but we are not professionals in that space. But we do understand that there are a lot of impacts in interrelations between the work we do and public safety.
Thanks, Alexander. The next question is for Katie Watt from Metro Transit. I'm going to reread the question for transparency. Not a question, this is from Aaron Keith. Just so you know, the disruption of bus routes affects many folks all over. That makes option 2, moving the fifth sculpture to the northeast corner, the most logical and productive route. Lots of folks don't have online meeting capability. This meeting will fill any meeting room if it were not for social distancing. Okay, do you want to speak to that first part?
Yes, thank you for the comment to the commenter, and I think I'll just mention that as we're looking at this site, the Route 23 that runs east-west on 38th Street, currently that route is detoured between Bloomington and Park Avenues. It goes down to 42nd Street rather, before returning to its route. And the Route 5 is off of Chicago Avenue, traveling on Park and Portland between 35th, 36th Streets and 42nd. And so the commenter does note that folks are affected by that. And certainly Metro Transit is working closely with the city as we consider how transit access fits into these options and the interim winter options going forward.
Thank you, Katie. The next question is from Bill, and it can go to Alex or you, Ethan. To confirm, regardless of which option, for sure one will be implemented sometime this fall, right?
We cannot confirm a timeline yet. Earlier I spoke to the process we're at right now, which is going through October 6th to intake public comment and then share that with council members. But in terms of an implementation timeline, there is at least right now no definitive timeline. Although we are very actively working on that, we have not finalized that yet.
The only thing I would add to that is just a sort of a recognition that we know that people are very interested in knowing the timeline and other things like that, and we will be continuing to communicate out regularly, and we'll definitely notify folks for when implementation is coming.
Thank you, Ethan and Alex. The next question is either for Alex or Ethan. Is opening the intersection contingent on the justice groups agreeing?
I think that's a really complex question. Right now, you know, the city responded to the letter on September 17th and are working with that group to meet their demands. They have stated that they would not cede the intersection until their demands are met. I can't speak to overall what the city stances per se on that, but I know we do recognize and want to work with community to reach an agreement in a way that is mutually agreeable by all parties. There's a lot of trauma with what's unfolded. There's a lot of reverberations within the area, within the community. And I think with all the work we've done and all the efforts we've done, we've tried to be as sensitive and cautious and patient as possible. And that's why this street has been closed for so long, because we understand the complexity and sensitivity of it, and we are continuing to work towards a solution to the best of our ability.
Thank you, Alex. The next question is similar nature. What action plan do you have in case the people decide to that both options don't work? This one can go to Ethan or Alex.
I have some. So I'll just start, and you know, Ethan, please hop in with any additional comments. The options we're looking at, we've done some preliminary thinking, engaging, kind of realization of what would really work in this situation from a transportation access standpoint, from looking at our interim design principle standpoint. So we feel that these are the most viable options, and we are hoping to use this process to further vet those. As we've gone through and collected feedback so far, there's been good support towards these options. There's also opposition to opening it. There's also opposition to the designs as well. As I said earlier in this presentation, some people wanted the street open 4 months ago. Some people don't. Some people want the street closed forever. But we feel that with the options that we've given and the feedback we've gotten so far, that there's some interest in what we are presenting.
Thanks, Alex. The next question can go to Ethan. How do either of the options uphold the complete streets policy of pedestrians and people first?
So the city of Minneapolis has a complete streets policy, which provides that we're looking to support folks walking as our top priority in the city, people biking and taking transit, and then people driving, while we are working also to maintain and support access for people of all modes and however they get around. And so within this design, there are kind of two pieces here. We're talking today about the interim design for this winter. And within this design, we're recognizing the critical elements and space for people, whether they're walking or gathering on foot in the space. And we present two options that preserve a significant amount of space for that. We also, I think there's the recognition of the longer term conversations, which isn't the focus of today, but Alexander spoke to those. And in a longer term, that's going to be a co-creation process, collaborative process with community around that long-term vision, and there'll be we'll see where that takes us. But this is really focused on today, and we very much feel that this upholds the needs of the folks gathering in the area.
Thank you, Ethan. I just want to note we were at 7:20. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible, and I'll try to hit on some of the more questions that are unique and that we haven't heard before. So the next question is, sticking to the public safety theme, I'm guessing MPD will be asked to weigh in as to which option may optimize public safety. Alexander or Ethan, do you want to answer this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we're reviewing and vetting these concepts within city. So that includes Minneapolis Fire Department, Minneapolis Police Department, Office of Violence Prevention, surface water sewer, transportation maintenance removal, solid waste and recycling. And that's something we do with almost any project we do. We kind of internally review with the core team to ensure that the option we're recommending is viable. So to answer the question, yes.
All right. Thanks, Alexander. The next question will go to Ethan. How do either of these options succeed in TAP goals, Transportation Action Plan goals? And why not just buses only down these streets, no private vehicles? Why is there no pedestrian option? Why cars? This goes against all the city's policies on public rights of way, TAP, Vision Zero, Complete Streets, etc.
Thanks for the question. So as Trey mentioned, this refers to the city's still draft transportation action plan, which is a 10-year plan outlining the different investments and priorities for the city related to transportation. We're working right now actually on finalizing the plan after it was out for draft for public comment earlier this year. And we've been going through a lot of that feedback. So just for folks who aren't familiar with that document. And so within this, there's a lot of needs at the core here about access and through the winter for all people, however they get around. And so we've tried to put forward different options that reflect both the people trying to gather that are gathering in the space and the importance of that. And making sure the space doesn't go back to normal, as we talked about. It's not about that. This is an interim design for the winter. So this is just a short-term design. We do see we think it's very important to have bus access in the immediate intersection here. That's a critical need. Providing the bus access through the winter, we try to provide a couple different options to do that. And in order to facilitate both that and the local access for folks, that's what you see in the options, which we very much feel does reflect the city's policies. We do think these are things that will promote safety and access for people of all modes and uphold complete streets and Vision Zero and the transportation action plan. So we very much look forward to additional feedback from community members on that. As Alexander said, the final decisions haven't been made yet on the details. So that's why we're out for public comment. So please do share your thoughts. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ethan. The next question is about the options. Both options limit traffic flow from at least one direction of either 38th or Chicago, which will push traffic onto surrounding streets. For example, in option 1, northbound traffic cannot travel from 38th to 37th on Chicago. Can you discuss new detours for both options?
I'm just reading through the question, Trey.
All right, I will go to the options.
Alexander, I can start and then you can hop in here. So I think just to clarify, so option 2 would not limit flow from one direction. It only right turns from 38th, westbound 38th onto northbound Chicago. That'd be the only thing kind of limited the vehicle movements in the area. So we have heard a lot of feedback about detoured traffic, increased traffic and speed and concerns about that on neighboring streets over the last few months. So we definitely know that that's a concern and something we're trying to address with these designs. I think we're still we are waiting for feedback on this on these options before we finalize the details around any potential adjustments and detours in the area. I think we recognize both the desire for that reduced cut-through traffic and the desire to maintain the space at 38th and Chicago to serve the people gathering there. And so, though we don't have all the details on the detour routes, there will be adjustments in kind of either case, and we will build those out and communicate those out after we kind of go through the feedback that we've received and make final recommendations and final decisions on the option for the winter.
Thank you, Ethan. The next question relates to traffic models for some of these options. Have you done any computerized simulations to determine if one option is preferred from traffic flow and traffic safety perspectives? Ethan, would you like to take this one?
So our traffic team has done some traffic modeling in the area, kind of understanding the different impacts. I can say at a high level, what we found is 38th Street, there are fewer parallel routes for 38th Street, and I think we see that reflected in some of how traffic is detouring around the site, and we hear more. We're hearing complaints about traffic in both directions, but the east-west traffic volumes are definitely higher around in the detour traffic. we are certainly either option works from a traffic management perspective. And so all the options that we presented definitely have gone through that process. I will also just note that this is still an interim winter design. Longer term conversations are still to come. Additional conversations and thinking about the impacts of traffic and other access pieces will happen at that time.
Thanks, Ethan. The next question will go to Alex. With limited parking and extra pedestrian traffic, it would really help if the city could remove the mounds of snow that build up on sidewalks over the winter. Is that possible?
So that's a great question. As of now, snow removal does not occur in this area. There is plowing. When I say snow removal, that means a city vehicle loading snow into the bed of a truck and then taking it away from the site to dump it. As of now, that does not occur. There is no additional budgetary flexibility accommodated to perform that in this area. And I think with whatever option is implemented, there's going to be some further discussions needed with local members in the community to really fine tune how some of the more nuanced snow removal pieces will occur. Obviously, the city is responsible for removing snow on Chicago and on 38th Street. And Ethan talked about some of the more nuanced pieces like sidewalk snow removal and also removing snow around some of the art pieces. So we'll have to work towards some collaborative efforts, but it's unlikely that we would be removing the mounds of snow via city truck offsite to dump. But great question, and thank you for asking that.
Thanks, Alexander. The next question is similar. From a plowing perspective, wouldn't it be more practical to go with option 2, requiring no bus detours, since local streets often are not plowed quickly and that could hinder the buses routed via local streets?
So I think practical is, so great question, Bill. I think practical is really in the eyes of the beholder. I think there's pros and cons to each example. Option 2 is more beneficial from a Metro Transit standpoint, but I would say option 2 may not be as beneficial from a public space standpoint. And so that's why we're providing different options to give folks like you and others on this chat and through the survey the opportunity to indicate what you prefer and why. Yes, thank you. That's it.
I would just add that and neither option nor the existing condition are buses routed via local non-snow emergency streets, and so that wouldn't happen in any scenario. And these options, as I think we talked about earlier, we have discussed and vetted with our winter maintenance folks to ensure that they're feasible.
Thank you, Ethan. Looks like we've made our way through all the questions. I'll briefly open up the floor if anyone else wants to make a comment. Otherwise, I will jump into going through further details. Okay, so a bit of meeting logistics. This meeting will be recorded and we will be posting it on the 38th in Chicago website. You can also email the 30th in Chicago Minneapolis email page or email address, where we will receive your email and respond accordingly. There's also a survey that is currently out, and it concludes on Sunday, October 4th. We will also be doing door knocking and continued engagement through Tuesday, October 6th as well. You can see the contact information for Alexander, Ethan, and Sarah McKenzie, our media relations coordinator, is shown below. And any other questions that may come from this group, should you think of them after this presentation, can be emailed to those to Alexander, Ethan, or Sarah. So that concludes the 38th in Chicago Interim Design Open House, and thank you all for attending.